Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Desatari Nijaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We ended with Giriraj Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj going for donations together for Vrindavan. Meanwhile, Matre was continuing to attack us on all fronts. We soon received notices from the office of the Charity Commissioner and the Foreign Registration Office. And some of the devotees, fearing that they may be arrested, took shelter of us in Shivner. Shivner? Shivner? What's Shivner? No idea. To help.
Shivner was someone's home.
Okay. To help deal with all the challenges, Tamal Krishna, here he comes. He's going to come up with another wild one. And some of the other leading Bombay devotees concluded that we should turn the management of ISKCON in Bombay over to life members. Ooh, ooh, ooh. And supporters who were more experienced and expert than we and were both affluent and influential, and just preach and give spiritual guidance. So we scheduled an early morning meeting at Sadaji Watlal's office with a committee of some of our best supporters, including Sadaji Watlal, Bridge Ratan Mahota, and Maheshwari and Bogilal Patel. Hey, Bogilal. With the intention of giving them control. The night before the meeting, however, Harikesh told me excitedly that I'd read something that made him think we shouldn't go through with the plan. He and I had both been suffering from jaundice, and we were spending much of our time in beds, convalescing. He had been reading Prabhupada's as yet published Nectar of Instruction and had come across a purport that seemed to address our situation. He read me the relevant verse, Dadati Pratikarnati, etc. Then he read Prabhupada's purport, which explained the other side of the instruction. In this regard, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur warns all devotees engaged in broadcasting the Krishna consciousness movement not to speak to the impersonalists or Mayavadis. If a snake is given milk to drink, its poison simply increases. For a similar reason, we should not disclose our minds to the serpent Mayavadis and Karmis. Such disclosures will never help. It is best to completely avoid associating with them and never ask them about anything confidential because they cannot give good advice. Unquote. Harikesh thought it was too dangerous to hand over management of the society to Hindus who were closer to being Mayavadis or materialists than being devotees, and we resolved to bring the matter up to Tamal Krishna and Achyutananda first thing the next morning. Before the meeting with Tamal Krishna, Harikesh spoke with Achyutananda, who agreed. It was delicate because we knew how intent Tamal Krishna was to engage these men and get relief from the management himself. But we felt that Srila Prabhupada and Lord Krishna had revealed the purport to us just in time to avoid a possible calamity. The meeting was set for 7:30. At about 5:30, Harikesh and I went to Tamal Krishna's room, read the purport to him and the other leaders, and implored them to not hand over too much control to the committee. At first, Tamal Krishna was apprehensive, because he'd been telling the members that we wanted to give them responsibility and control. But eventually everyone in the room agreed because most of the committee members, as pious and as friendly as they were not really devotees. They had already tried to involve us in the material welfare activities and suggested that to attract more people, we should include famous Mayavadis in our programs. So we arrived at the explanation for them that it was both reasonable and spiritually valid, and at the meeting, all the members accepted or acquiesced to our retaining control of the management. They all knew that the movement was Srila Prabhupada's and understood they could not try to go beyond the limits we set or demand control. Whew. It was almost another disaster. Oh, Tamal. In the midst of all the intrigues and conflicts, I sent Srila Prabhupada my Vyasa Puja offering, and on August 23, from Bhaktivedanta Manor, he sent me an encouraging note. I beg to acknowledge receipt of your letter. A nice Vyasa Puja offering you sent. I have sent it to Satsrup Goswami for printing in the BTG. Writing is a very important part of our work, and Satsrup is always anxious to have new material from the devotees for expanding the BTG. You have nice talent for writing, and practice makes perfect, so continue. It will be appreciated. Eventually, BTG published my offering, in which I described my first meeting with Srila Prabhupada and how he had transformed my life. So here we go. Poetry. All glories to you who have given us light to open our eyes which were firmly shut tight. When we first came to you in the darkness of night, the words from your lips made everything bright. What is your goal? Godhead to find or God to become? Please make up your mind. If you want to become God, you can't be God now. Can a non-God become God? Please let me know how. God is within you, sitting there in your heart, just waiting for your loving service to start. But if you insist that you want to be Him, you're cheating yourself and have nothing to win. If the seed of devotion with chanting you sow, then God will give sunlight to help it grow. But if to become God remains your ambition, why then should God help His own competition? Krishna is God, and God He is always, on Yashoda's lap or in Dwaraka's hallways, or in Kurukshetra, He's God all the time. It's not that by yoga the Lord He became. Same, became. You are a spark, and God is the fire. You can be godly if you truly desire. Your qualities match His, but the quantities are different, for God's nature is infinite, whereas you are insignificant. I cannot be God, for truly I am small, but He kindly allows me to serve Him, that's all. That is His mercy, transcendent and sweet. Take it, be happy, that's all I entreat. Thus your divine grace we were blessed to meet, and thus we were forced to fall at your feet. You poured nectar like words through the holes in our ears to clean out our hearts and vanquish our fears, arousing within us our love for the Lord, our actual life as His servant restored. Now we beg to remain individual souls serving the servant of the one spirit whole. All glories to you who have given us this, a life that's eternal, full of knowledge and bliss. Taking us from the darkness, cold and alone, back to Godhead, back to home. Break. With the sales agreement canceled, we didn't know what to do. The situation seemed hopeless. Several influential life members had tried to convince Mrs. Nair to sell us the property, but she just wouldn't listen. And so we sent a telegram to Prabhupada asking him to come to Bombay to settle the matter with Mrs. Nair personally. I had heard from Gargamuni, who was the first devotee to meet Bogilal Patel, that when he had told Seth Bogilal about how Prabhupada had spread Lord Krishna's message and service in America and throughout the world, Bogilal had wept with joy and immediately became a life member. I developed a friendship with Seth Bogilal, who was quite humble and soft hearted, and he became one of our best well wishers and supporters. Bogilal had a mansion, more like a palace, with dozens of servants on Walkeshwar Street near the sea. And when I approached him with the idea of Prabhupada staying at his house named Duscot, Duscote,
I don't know.
Duscot, Duscote, he happily agreed. Having received word that Prabhupada would be coming to Bombay, Tamal Krishna had arranged for our entire flat to be freshly painted and for a proper altar to be set up in the hall. Sridhar cleaned the flat and got it ready with new cushions and bolsters and nice decorations. When Prabhupada came, Tamal Krishna and the other leading sannyasis took him through every room. Then they escorted him into the smaller room where he sat on his asana and spoke to the devotees. Sridhar cut up a plate of fruit and placed it on a small table beside Prabhupada, who paused, looked up, and said, "Thank you very much." Prabhupada had often been served fruit, Sridhar knew. He wasn't saying thank you for that. And he couldn't have known that it was Sridhar who had cleaned up the flat, but he knew that Sridhar was trying to serve him, just like the other more senior devotees. And he was thanking Sridhar for giving his life. Quote, "That was so gratifying when any devotee got that kind of reciprocation from Prabhupada," Sridhar remembered. "It made it all worthwhile." Brahmananda was in Bombay for some days to purchase items for the deities in East Africa. When Prabhupada asked him why he had come to Bombay, to India, Brahmananda replied to get mukutas, and everything for the deities. "Oh, you cannot make flower mukutas?" Prabhupada asked. Nairobi was known for its plentiful flowers, and Prabhupada's Punjabi disciple there, Shakti Mata, had a landscaping business and a nursery of many exotic plants. You just make a wire framework and then stick flowers in it, and that's your crown. If necessary, there are Indian jewelers in Nairobi, and they can make flutes and other items. There's no need for you to come to India. Prabhupada criticized us for not having a morning program. Were we having regular programs? Or, he inquired, is it simply going out and coming back and eating and sleeping? Well, Tamal Krishna replied, we want to have a morning class, and Monday, Wednesday, Friday to have evening programs, evening discourse. Were they going on? Prabhupada wanted to know. We just fixed up the place, Tamal Krishna said. The day you arrived was the first day it was painted. Until then, it was not fit for anyone to come into. It was very nasty. But you are living there since a long time, Prabhupada said. We have been living, but we have not invited others. No, you may invite others or not, Prabhupada persisted, but was your program going on? No, it wasn't, Prabhupada. Then it was simply a joint mess that you go and collect and come and eat and sleep. Yes, that is very dangerous. Then you will all fall down. If you make a joint mess, if you go and collect something and then eat and sleep, then everything will be Therefore, I do not want you to keep separate. Temple worship means there will be regulated principles that you will have to rise early in the morning, attend class and kirtan. As soon as you give up all these things, zero. Then it will be like karmis, as they are hard labor, collecting money and enjoying senses, that's all. That is the pitfall everywhere. In the church, temple, as soon as they get some nice income, then in the name of priest, sadhu, sannyasi, they do the same thing. Vishaya chadiya se rasa majiya. As soon as we give up the Shravanam Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, then it will become Vishaya. Vishaya means materialism. There is no spiritualism. Shurasya dhara. Shura means sharpened razor. If you are careful, you cleanse very nicely, but if you're not careful, immediately blood, immediately. Spiritual life is like that. As soon as you become a little inattentive, immediately Maya captures you. Yes, come on. Then everything is failure. You've got the tendency to enjoy the senses. The senses are strong. As soon as there is opportunity, the senses will take advantage immediately. Then your whole business is finished. So, if we do not follow strictly our regular principles, routine work, then the whole scheme will be failure. Anyway, that is the danger in keeping a separate department for collecting money. Then it will turn. Collect money, eat nicely, sleep nicely. And to live in the temple, at least one is forced to rise early in the morning, take bath, have darshan. They'll get regulated life. Therefore, this temple worship is needed because we are so impure. At least in the temple, by following regular principles, we can keep ourselves pure. Otherwise, simply chanting is sufficient. There is no need of constructing big temple, but we are so impure. That is Jiva Goswami's recommendation, that as soon as we give up this temple worship method, regular principles, we become victim of Maya. Veshopa Jivaka. As they are working and doing some business, then our dress will be a means of business. This will be another material business. Actually, they are doing so. That is the danger of keeping a separate department. What is the use? The danger is very much there, Tamal Krishna agreed. I see that. But there is a use. Well, if the danger is there, why should we accept such use? Can we overcome that danger, Tamal Krishna asked? We can try to overcome that danger. You cannot overcome because you are all weak. Unless you are very strong, Maya is very much stronger than you. How you can avoid it? Only one who is very strong in capturing the lotus feet of Krishna can avoid. Otherwise, it is not possible. All these vile parle Juhu gentlemen are daily coming to their city business, and is it very difficult for us? Tamal Krishna replied, they have an office, though, that they come to in the city. Their business is office, but your business is begging. Your business is not office. They have to direct so many things from there. That we can do. Anyway, even if they have got an office, they come in Bombay, Calcutta, even from 100 miles away. If there is no such program, deity worship regular principles, then it'll be a joint mess. Hotel, transcendental hotel, and transcendental fraud. This will go on. The business will be transcendental fraud, and life will be transcendental hotel. Nowadays, modern civilization, as we are accepting, there is Jeep, there is telephone, everything is there. One can conduct his activities from anywhere. But it didn't work last time, Tamal Krishna said. They stopped their preaching. The last time everyone moved to Juhu, they completely lost contact. with all life members in the city because they found it very difficult to continuously go back and forth. So keep it just like a temple, not that the Nepean Sea Road flat downtown, Chutanand inquired. It should be kept like a temple? Yes. The temple routine work must go on there, but no deity, Tamal Krishna said. Deity, there is picture. Prabhupada said, that's all right. Do you think the picture is not deity? There are 8 kinds of deity. Picture is also deity. Even thinking of Krishna within the mind is deity, but we are not so expert that within the mind we can worship the deity. We are gross men, so we must have deity worship. Otherwise, you can worship deity anywhere, sit down and think. But the method must be there. Bhumirapolalo vayu kamano. The mind is also a material thing, and if you think of Krishna's form within the mind, it is as good as you worship the deity in the temple, made of brass, wood, or stone, because both of them are Krishna's energy. Krishna's energy is not different from Krishna. Krishna can accept your service, and any of these so-called material elements, actually, there are no material things. Material means the desire for sense gratification. Atmendriya pritivancha tari bali kama. That is material. Krishnendriya priti icha dhare prema nam. And the desire to please Krishna's senses is spiritual. So, picture must be kept in a nice altar, and regularly arti and everything should go on. Okay. While Prabhupada was in Bombay, Tamal Krishna instituted a morning class at Shiv Nair, which was just a few blocks away from Bhogi Lal Patel's house. We would go to Set Bhogi Lal early in the morning to see Prabhupada, hoping to accompany him on his morning walk. Tamal Krishna wanted us to return to Shiv Nair for the class. But when he complained to Prabhupada that it was time for class and the devotees didn't want to go, Prabhupada replied, that's all right. I have just come. They want to be with me. We had also arranged outside programs with Prabhupada for potential donors. When we mentioned the name of Dr. Mohanlal Piramal, a textile magnate, Piramal spinning and weaving mills, that Prabhupada was in Bombay, he was eager that Prabhupada should come to his home. Prabhupada accepted the invitation, telling us that we should go ahead and begin and that he would follow. He arrived while the Chutananda was singing bhajans and was ushered to a sofa, on which he sat cross-legged and observed the bhajans and the devotees. After a while, he said, chant Hare Krishna. So he did kirtan, and then he spoke. After the lecture, our host wanted to feed us, especially Prabhupada. Prabhupada left, but we stayed behind to honor Prasad and associate with our host, his wife, his mother, and a few other family members. Later, Prabhupada questioned our method of, quote, preaching. He said, this is not preaching. To go to some rich man's house and flatter him and sing a few songs and take prasad. Do you actually preach? Whew. Yes, Tamal Krishna said, we preach very forcefully. We don't just flatter. Well then, all right, Prabhupada replied, but soon thereafter, he introduced conditions for having outside programs. He said that we should accept the program only if there would be a large donation or a large gathering in which people could take up chanting Hare Krishna. He also said that he didn't want the programs to take away from our preaching at Juhu. So, although the system we had devised for collecting funds for Vrindavan had been successful, we could understand that Prabhupada wanted our program to be pure. The gates and entrances to Das Kot were emblazoned with the family crest, a crowned pair of wooden sandals flanked by a prancing horse and lion. The front doors opened to a set of stairs and the hallway to Prabhupada's wing with marble flooring, gold framed paintings along the wall, and ornate metal tables on whose marble tops were displayed decorative vases, Ming jades, sounds like Chinese, ivory carvings, and other priceless traditional works of art. There was even an elevator up to the second floor. Bogilal Patel had allotted Prabhupada a bedroom and a darshan room for meeting people, and across the way, an area for Prabhupada's assistants, including his servant Shrudakiti and his Sanskrit editor Pradumna. At the end of the darshan room was Prabhupada's usual low table and asana. The rest of the room was arranged for people to sit on the floor, with chairs available for special guests. To get from the servants' area to the hallway, one had to pass by the doorway to the darshan room. When I passed one day, I saw Gargamuni and Tawal sitting opposite Prabhupada's desk, arguing with him. I was surprised. I had never seen disciples argue so vehemently with him. We are wasting our time in India, Gargamuni was saying. Prabhupada clearly wanted them to stay. We are just like businessmen, one of them said. We're collecting money and making life members. Prabhupada was sympathetic to their frustrations, but told them, I want you to stay here. It is the spiritual master's desire that you stay here, so that is better. Isn't it service to go to America and preach? One asked. In America, the preaching is so much better. I was sitting off to the side, Shrutakirti recalled, amazed at the intensity of my godbrothers. Gargamuni and Tall Krishna seemed relentless. But the more they were determined to leave India, the more Prabhupada was determined to have them stay. It was evident that Prabhupada considered the preaching work in India to be of the utmost importance. Seeing how upset Prabhupada was, I was squirming in the corner of the room. I also understood how hard it was to stay in India. Srila Prabhupada was depending on these men to assist him in this important work, and they felt they just couldn't do it any longer. It was a fierce battle. The intensity of the negotiation was something I would have expected among peers rather than between spiritual master and disciple. Prabhupada wanted them to stay, and that was final. They argued that they need to leave India to preach. At this time, the West was fertile preaching field. Finally, in apparent disgust, Prabhupada said, all right, you just chant your 16 rounds, follow the 4 regular principles, and do any damn thing you want. Unquote. Oh, I don't. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. With devotees staying in his Shiv Nair flat, Mr. Mohata, who lived nearby, asked one or two of them to come to his home every morning and teach him about the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, at Bogilal Patel's, Mr. Mohata complained to Prabhupada that when he asked the devotees questions, they could not answer. Brahmananda, who was one of Mr. Mohata's, quote, teachers, replied, when he asks questions, we read him the answers in your books. Prabhupada curled his lips and shook his head. He doesn't want to know what is in the books. He wants to know what you know. As I was passing by the door to Prabhupada's room one day, he motioned to me with his eyes to enter. Bharadraja's singing of Narottam Das Thakur's Gauranga Duti Pada, Gaurangera Duti Pada, was playing from a new album of kirtans, Every Town and Village, recorded live at the New York Temple. When it was over, Prabhupada looked up and said, "When I am no longer present, you can listen to this song and remember your spiritual master." It was a poignant statement that entered deep in my heart. I considered why Prabhupada had singled out that song. One verse says, Gauranga Gunete Jure Nityalila Tare Spure Sejana Bhakati Adhikar. If anyone feels ecstasy and cries from appreciating Gauranga's transcendental qualities, he becomes eligible to perform the pure devotional service. And I was confident that if I or we remembered Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, that's interesting. He's always saying Prabhupada, and here he's saying Srila Prabhupada. We remember and I was confident that if I or we remembered Srila Prabhupada in that mood of appreciation, such feelings of separation, we would get the same result. Prabhupada, what a teacher. One Saturday morning, we had an appointment with Ashok Birla, whom Tamal Krishna and I had been cultivating over a period of months. Ashok was different from the others, more staid Birlas. Once, when he greeted us at the Birla Mansion on Mount Pleasant Road, he was wearing a short-sleeved silk shirt covered with American flags. Wow. And whereas the most affluent men, including the Birlas, usually rode in big Mercedes-Benzes, Ashok drove in a smaller, sportier BMW. After many months of cultivating him, we decided the time had come to ask him for a donation, and we showed him a list of different parts of the Vrindavan project and how much each item would cost. After looking at the list, Ashok asked us what we wanted him to contribute for. We weren't exactly sure what to say, but I replied, "We thought you could build the temple room," the single largest item on the list, an expense of 3 lakhs of rupees. He immediately agreed, "Yes, I will do that." In fact, he conceded so easily that we were thinking that maybe we should have asked for more. Practically everyone else was appreciated, but everyone else we approached would offer a lesser figure, and then we would have to discuss and argue with them to convince them to give more. Anyway, he agreed to give 3 lakhs, and we were quite happy. Then, before leaving, we informed him that Prabhupada was staying nearby at Bogilal Patel's house, and we invited him to come and meet him. It was around 9, and he said that he would come to meet Prabhupada shortly, before lunchtime. When we returned to Bogilal Patel's house, Tamal Krishna informed Prabhupada about Mr. Birla's commitment for Vrindavan and told him that Ashok would be coming before lunch. Time passed, and after waiting until around noon, we phoned Ashok to see what happened. It hadn't been possible for him to come in the morning, he said, but he would come in the afternoon. So Prabhupada took prasad. By evening, Ashok still hadn't arrived, so he called again. This time he gave a message that he would come next morning. "He will never come," Prabhupada said. "He has given his money, that's enough." Still, the next morning, we were hoping that Ashok would come. We phoned his house, and we were told that although he wouldn't be able to come, his mother could come meet Prabhupada later that morning. Prabhupada was satisfied with that. Srimati Gopi Kumari Birla arrived right on time. Although she was a member of the richest family in India, one of the richest in the world, Mrs. Birla was a very humble and respectful. Was very humble and respectful to Prabhupada. Upon entering the room, she bowed down and offered her obeisances to him, and she sat at a respectful distance on the floor. Prabhupada immediately began preaching to her, quoting Sanskrit verses from the second chapter of first canto Bhagavatam. She was a highly educated and cultured lady who was also spiritually inclined, so she responded by quoting other verses in Sanskrit, and Prabhupada was very pleased with her. Before leaving, she again offered her respects, and afterward Prabhupada commented, "She is a very nice lady." 3 months later in Los Angeles, where I was recovering from my jaundice, Prabhupada told Brij Ratan Mohata that our good friend from Bombay and his wife, R.D. Birla's daughter, Ashok's mother, came to see me in Bombay. Yes, very nice lady. She had arranged for 2 or 3 of your programs in her school, Mr. Mohata reported. We showed the series of slides of Prahlad Maharaj, I added. The children enjoyed it very much. We also held a Janmashtami program at the school. We were always ready to encourage her, both her and her students, and she did everything she could to encourage the spread of Krishna consciousness. And they wanted to leave India. Very selfish. Before leaving Daskot for Juhu, Prabhupada asked everyone from Seth Bogilal's domestic staff who had been serving him to come to his darshan room. He gave each of them some dakshina, a monetary gift in appreciation for their service during his stay. I was surprised. I hadn't expected Prabhupada to give, quote, Krishna's money away like that. Then I realized how much I had to learn about real culture, traditional Indian culture, and about Krishna consciousness. Later, Prabhupada wrote me, Bogilal Patel is a perfect gentleman. He has got money and also heart. His son is also good. And in a conversation in Los Angeles the following year, he appreciated the rationale and culture behind Seth Bogilal's opulent lifestyle. When Tamal Krishna remarked that Bogilal had 23 cars just for him and his son and his wife's son, Prabhupada explained, yes, they're spending money to save income tax. They have got enough income. So instead of giving to the income tax, they are thinking, why not provide some drivers, some servants, and repair the house every year? In this way, they spend money. It is a good policy. Money distributed to the poor instead of going to the government's pocket. Far out. He's got at least 35 servants, and it is only the father and son and daughter-in-law, Tamal Krishna pointed out. That's all. Prabhupada, no children even. They gave us so much attention. They are favorable to us, especially the father. And his son, Pranlal, is also a nice boy. Yes, he's very intelligent. He knows what we are doing. His wife also, that young girl. Yes, very nice. They're actually a little aristocratic, I think. Oh, yes. When I was staying there, that young girl, the daughter-in-law, was always taking care. Swamiji, what do you want? What can I serve you? And Bogilal was coming daily to talk with me. Pranlal was offering any help that he could. Your secretaries were treated very nicely. That they gave us each a car. That was a wonderful stay. That was when Mrs. Nair surrendered at that house. So we haven't heard her surrendering yet. He just get us interested. When Prabhupada had arrived in Bombay, Mr. Vakil had contacted Mrs. Nair's solicitor, Mr. Shah, who had confirmed that she didn't want to sell us the land. Quote, she has someone to buy it for 20 lakhs or more, he said, but practically she can get any big amount for it. Unquote. Still, he felt sure that if we were ready to pay 17 lakhs in cash right then, she would go for it. You're just trespassers, Shah stated. You have no claim to be on the land or to buy the land. The court case is coming up, and when it comes up, you'll be thrown off the land. It will be better if you just paid the 17 lakhs now and finished up. Prabhupada was not happy with the proposal. He could see that the increase in price was the result of so many lawyers being involved, each wanting his cut. As he later explained, they were thinking, cancel the agreement and take 17 or 20 lakhs from him, and the balance should be divided amongst us. Our tenant, Mrs. Warrior, had been visiting Mrs. Nair, along with Mr. Asnani, the lawyer who was our life member and friend. And she had heard that Mrs. Nair was hard pressed for money. Mr. Nair, quote, had taken money from everybody and spent lavishly, she said, and his creditors were demanding payment. Selling the land to us would be mutually beneficial, she had told Mrs. Nair. You need money and they want the land. It is better just to finish up the deal. Otherwise, you'll be fighting like this for years. Nobody is gaining anything. And if you give it to the temple, at least in your next birth, you will be benefited. What are you doing? Mr. Asnani had asked Mrs. Nair. You're not getting any money, and you're not enjoying the use of the land. Swamiji is very good. He will take care of all your many needs. But Mrs. Nair wasn't convinced. She claimed to have higher offers. They are offering 14, she had said, of us, but another person is offering 25. What would you do with 25 lakhs and only one person? Mrs. Warrior had asked. How much money do you require to live in this world? You're the only person. You don't have any close relatives. Yes, that is true, Mrs. Nair had replied. But so much sickness is there, and I really want cash now. 14, then, Mrs. Warrior had countered. You can ask more, but you don't expect 25. And everything in one installment. If that is the only condition, don't worry. If you want tomorrow, they will give you money. So, you'll talk to them? Mrs. Nair had agreed, at least to meet with Prabhupada. Yes, Prabhupada said when he heard Mrs. Nair's willingness to see him. Bring her to me, and I will speak to her. She is my daughter. Tell her Prabhupada said, you are my daughter, and I love you. Mrs. Warrior and Mr. Asnani conveyed his message to Mrs. Nair, and it was arranged that she would come and meet Prabhupada the following night. In the meantime, however, Mrs. Nair's solicitors were demanding an immediate response. We have to know today, they told us. You pay 17 lakhs and settle up, or we are going to drive you out. You tell us yes or no. Otherwise, it's all finished. So what to do? Prabhupada asked. But we didn't know what to say. Finally, he told us, okay, we will pay. Actually, we don't even want this land. But because I invited Radha and Krishna to come here, it will be a great insult if they are driven away, and I could not bear that. We were supposed to give our answer to Mr. Vakil the following day. Prabhupada said that we should prepare a draft of a letter agreeing to take the land for the increased amount, show it to Mr. Vakil, and ask his advice. But he should put some mistakes in the letter. We should put some mistakes in the letter so Mr. Vakil will have to ask us to make corrections. Oh, wow. 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 And then we would tell him that we had to take the letter back to retype it and would bring it back. That would give us at least one more day to maneuver. I was struck by how intelligent and diplomatic, how clever Prabhupada was. And while all this was going on, he was holding programs and giving lectures practically every night. Mogilal Patel and his son, Pranlal, had arranged a gathering of aristocratic people from Malabar Hill on the terrace of their home. But that evening, when Prabhupada was on the terrace about to lecture, he was told that Mrs. Nair had arrived and immediately went down to his room to see her, leaving us to continue the program without him. In his room, Prabhupada sent everyone out except Tamal Krishna, Shamsundar, Mr. Asnani, Mrs. Warrior, and Mrs. Nair, and then closed the doors. He spoke to Mrs. Nair with a kind-hearted tenderness. "You are my daughter," he told her. "I will take care of you." Mrs. Nair bowed down at his feet and burst into tears. "I am sorry," she implored. "Please forgive me. I didn't intend all these things to happen. Now, I just want to give you the land and be peaceful again." Prabhupada touched her head gently. "Don't worry," he consoled her. "I will see to all your needs for the rest of your life." If she surrendered to him, he was telling her, he would give her all protection. It was an important lesson for me too, that anyone who surrendered to Prabhupada would be completely protected by him. Hearing of this exchange, I asked myself, why am I hesitating? This woman is just surrendering to him now, and Prabhupada is giving her complete protection. Well, I have been hanging around the movement for years and have never really surrendered. It was a good lesson. Prabhupada told Mrs. Nair that he still accepted the terms she had proposed, that he pay the balance of 12 lakhs, a total of 14, plus an extra 50,000 rupees as compensation for the delay, and she agreed. Prabhupada was fully prepared. He had already had Tamal Krishna type up a draft of a new settlement, and as soon as Mrs. Nair agreed, he pulled it out. What a story. He told Mr. Asnani to go over the terms of the conveyance with Mrs. Nair and make whatever changes they saw fit right then and there. While the new agreement was being typed up, Prabhupada went back up to the roof and delivered a beautiful lecture. When he was done, he rose from his seat and went back downstairs, and he and Mrs. Nair signed the document with November 1 as the tentative deadline for the signing of the final conveyance. The next step was tricky, since we couldn't inform Mrs. Nair's lawyers, or our lawyers, or any of the lawyers serving as go-betweens. They were being cut out of the transaction and would try to stop it. And Prabhupada was not going to leave Bombay. Quote, "Twice he had made the mistake of trying to let us do the conveyance," Tamal Krishna recounted, "and both times we were unable. This time he did everything himself." The drum roll, the violins going. The next day, sitting on his asana behind his low table, Srila Prabhupada was talking with Gargamuni and Achyutananda, waiting for the arrival of our American bank manager. He was touching on the same themes, warning his disciples of the dangers of working hard simply to get money and enjoying the senses, and explaining our mission, why we were collecting, and how to avoid criticism. Our mission, he said, is to teach that you are simply wasting your time. Take to Krishna consciousness. That is our only business. And the next business is that those who cannot directly take to the process should help this movement. Therefore, we go to door to connect them with this movement, life member. People are misunderstanding. They have no other good business. Transcendental fraud, giving us some book, and taking money and eating and sleeping. They are thinking like that. So, Tamal Krishna said, we should preach strongly, and they should know that we also preach. Yes. They should know that it is for their benefit that we're making them life members, not for our benefit. And that should be the motive. We should deal with them so that they may develop their Krishna consciousness. If you simply make it a point, somehow or other, take some money from them and let them go to hell, that is transcendental fraud. What do you think, Gargamuni? Yes, we have to preach. He's the one who wants to leave the country. Yes, Prabhupada continued. If, by the dress of a sannyasi, you take some money and eat and sleep, then it is transcendental fraud. Just like others who are toiling, just like others are toiling, we are getting money by some dress, that's all. They're getting money by laboring hard, and we are getting money. In India, mostly the sannyasis do that. The priests also do that. That is our profession. This is our profession. My Guru Maharaj said that instead of earning livelihood by showing the deity in the temple, it's better take the profession of a sweeper in the street and live honestly. He said like that. The sweeper is working hard, toiling, and getting some money and living. That is honest living. And this is honest living. Just then, the bank manager arrived, accompanied by an Indian lady, Bhanu, who worked under him. The manager was being called back to America, and he wanted Bhanu to help us in his absence. After some preliminary discussion on spiritual life, Bhanu told Prabhupada that people might find Juhu far away and hard to reach. In Juhu, there are many people, Prabhupada stated. Juhu, people are not coming here, and people here will not go there. Any part of Bombay is itself a big city. But where will we get such big land in the city? Our property is 20,000 square yards, and by the Bombay beach, by the Juhu beach. For this facility, yes, a new town is growing there. Prabhupada asked the bank manager if he had been to Juhu, and the man replied that he used to live there in a large white 6-story building on the beach, which Prabhupada passed on his morning walks. How did you like that place, Juhu? Prabhupada asked. Very much, the manager said. Quiet, peaceful. After a day of work in the bank, it's a nice place to retreat to. I take the train. It's 33 minutes by train between Churchgate and Juhu. So, where is the difficulty? Prabhupada turned to ask his disciples. Such a responsible officer, bank manager, coming and going, and you sannyasis can't come and go? He has got responsible duties. He has to arrive in the office exactly on time. Prabhupada asked the manager if other bank officers might be living in Juhu, and he replied that National and Grinsley Bank officers were there, and that several British companies had officers there as well. Soon thereafter, we all left the Shivner flat for Juhu. Prabhupada moved into Mr. Sethi's house, which was still under construction in the Juhu scheme. It was spacious and well built, just not completely finished. The marble wasn't polished, and the temporary lighting was dim, and Mr. Sethi and his family had not yet moved in. Prabhupada could receive visitors there, and at his direction, I arranged a meeting with Mr. Shantilal Mehta, the shrewd, seasoned businessman who, with his son, ran S. Chaganlal and Brothers, which had a claim on the Juhu land. An elderly Jain, the older Mr. Mehta, came dressed in traditional white Indian suit, vest, and cap. Prabhupada remained seated on his asana. Almost immediately after entering, as if to catch Prabhupada off guard, Mr. Mehta said, "I understand you're in negotiations with Mrs. Nair, so who will take the land, you or me?" Prabhupada sat up straight, looked him in the eye, and said, "I will." "Well, what about my claim?" Mehta objected. "My claim is for 6 lakhs. A hugely inflated figure. "My claim is for 12 lakhs, Prabhupada countered. If Mehta wanted the land, he would have to pay Prabhupada 12 lakhs to withdraw. Mr. Mehta could see that he was up against a smart, tough fighter, not just some simple elderly sadhu. His eyes opened wider, and his whole demeanor seemed to change, to become humbler and more respectful. Prabhupada began preaching to him. "We will use the land for good cause. We will make a temple." Mr. Mehta agreed to a meeting with Prabhupada and Mrs. Nair to negotiate how much she would have to pay him to get him to withdraw his claim. According to the sales agreement, Prabhupada could hold back the majority of his payments until Chaganlal withdrew its claim in the High Court. Satisfied with the arrangement, Mr. Mehta offered his respects. I escorted him down the stairs. He kept shaking his head, saying, "Your Guru Maharaj is Paka. He's a real Guru Maharaj. He is Paka." One morning, Prabhupada was sitting in his room on the 2nd floor, absorbed in discussion with friends and disciples about the struggle for the land. Suddenly, a muscular, sinewy laborer appeared at the door, paused, and with all eyes on him, entered the room without introduction. The man's complexion was dark, and he wore only a small, faded cloth around his waist. I was apprehensive. He walked toward Prabhupada, placed a bunch of flowers on his desk, bowed down, looked at him, and walked out. Prabhupada was so moved by the man's simple act of devotion that for several moments he could not speak. He just looked down and closed his eyes. Finally, with a choked voice, he said, "Such a simple man." Yet somehow he understood that a saintly person is here, and he gathered some flowers to offer. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, "Patram pushpam palam toyam." If one offers me a leaf or flower with love and devotion, I will accept it. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and even his heart is touched by such devotion. What to speak of an insignificant living entity like me? How much more I feel overwhelmed. Now that was 20 pages, but we read some poems in between. So I'm going to go further. Prabhupada arranged another meeting with Chaganlal, which was again held in his room at Mr. Sethi's. He sat behind his desk and was joined by Mrs. Nair with her advocate, and the senior Mr. Mehta with his son. Right away, Mrs. Nair verbally attacked Chaganlal, and Shantilal Mehta counterattacked. They fought bitterly, giving vent to years of hatred. Mrs. Nair despised Shantilal Mehta so much that she was ready to let things drag on for years rather than give it to him. And he felt the same way. He didn't care if his 50,000 rupees was tied up with her. He wasn't going to surrender. Prabhupada let them fight for a while and then said, "Now let's forget. What's done is done. Let's forget about it." He pacified them and they started talking civilly. But the animosity soon erupted again and they resumed fighting. Prabhupada again had to pacify them and quiet down. And eventually, when the fighting passions came down to a smolder, he said, "Now let us discuss." Just then, Mr. Ganatra, the former mayor, walked in and started glorifying Srila Prabhupada, offering obeisances and prayers. He was a well-known and popular figure, and Mr. Mehta knew him. "Swamiji," Mr. Gunta said, "I came for your darshan. I had no idea I would be walking into this." "Maybe you can help me," Prabhupada suggested, and he explained the situation. "Don't worry," Mr. Ganata assured him. "I will take care of it." And he took Mr. Mehta and his son into another room. Wow, it's a movie. It's real life. That's why they make movies, because it's like this. While Mr. Ganata was speaking with Chagan Lao in the other room, Prabhupada spoke with Mrs. Nair. "How much are you willing to pay?" he asked. "Well, we have to pay the 50,000 he gave us, plus we will give him another 25. That's all. You have to pay the rest. If he has an extra claim, you have to pay the rest. You have to pay." "Why should we pay?" Prabhupada questioned. "I'm already paying you for the land. This is your problem with Chagan Lao." When Mr. Ganatra entered the room, everyone wanted to know how much the Metas were demanding. "He wants 4 lakhs. 4 lakhs? Oh no, that's impossible," Mrs. Nair retorted. "We can't pay that." "How much are you willing to pay?" "We can pay 75. "He is asking 4 lakhs and you want to pay 75. No. You have to do better than that. We have to settle this." Prabhupada appealed to Mrs. Nair to give more, and she said, "All right, 1 lakh. Then Mr. Ganatra returned to the Metas. Meanwhile, Prabhupada was encouraging Mrs. Nair to pay more if necessary. The rest of us couldn't wait to hear what Mr. Ganatra would say when he returned. Finally came back and he told us, "I persuaded him to come down to 3 lakhs, 25,000, but that's it. I don't think he's going to go down any lower. You'll have to come up with a lot more than 1 lakh. I thought, oh no, there's such a gulf. But Prabhupada appealed to Mrs. Nair to offer more. "All right," she said, 1,25,000, but that's all." She was starting to get upset. Mr. Ganatra went back to Chaganlal. The situation was tense. I was feeling anxious. I didn't know what Chaganlal would demand next. It seemed that the negotiations could break down at any moment. When Mr. Ganatra returned, he said that Chaganlal would settle for 2 lakhs, 75,000, either that or nothing. Otherwise, he says he'll go to court and either he'll get 6 lakhs or he'll get the land. So he wants 2 lakhs, 75,000, and that's it. Now, what are you going to do?" It was intense. Everyone was sweating and squirming, and Mr. Ganata was coaxing. Srila Prabhupada conferred with Mrs. Nair. Finally, she said, "All right, I'll pay 1,40,000, and that's it."
It's the mayor of Bombay.
And Prabhupada told Ganata to offer 2,25,000, hinting that he would cover the difference. "I don't know what he'll say," Ganata told us, and he went back to Chaganlal. Some minutes later, he returned with a big smile on his face. They have agreed. The 2 Metas, father and son, followed Ganata into the room. Everyone was relieved and elated. So much had hinged on this issue. Then I realized that Mr. Ganata must have been exaggerating their claim. and determination with Mrs. Nair, and exaggerating Mrs. Nair's unwillingness when he met Chaganlal. It seemed like there was a huge gulf, but that was to get them to come down because our offer was so low, and to get Mrs. Nair to come up because their demand was so high, and eventually we had to meet in the middle. Chaganlal came down from 4 lakhs to 225, and Mrs. Nair came up from 75 to 140, and Prabhupada agreed to pay Chaganlal the difference, 85. Anyways, we were all relieved and elated and amazed by Prabhupada's expertise and kindness. It was only out of both Shantilal Mehta's and Mrs. Nair's deep respect and admiration for him that they were able to even come and sit together in the same room and talk. The Juhu story. With everyone still gathered, Prabhupada spoke about his mission and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, and he asked me to lead the singing of Nrsimha prayers. In the end, everyone was happy. It was decided that there would be another meeting, that we and Mrs. Nair would pay Chaganlal their money, and that they would withdraw the suit, and neither side would tell the solicitors. As a result of the negotiations, Mehta agreed to withdraw his suit from the High Court for a payment of 140,000 white from Mrs. Nair and 85,000 black from us. But the transaction was tricky because if we paid Mehta first, he could keep the money and not withdraw the case. And if he withdrew the case first, we could just keep the money, especially because nothing could be done legally to enforce a black transaction. All the principal parties other than Mrs. Nair met in the office of our solicitor, Mr. Behsania, at Mullah and Mullah. The basic plan was discussed, but there was a major hitch. Who would hold the black money? As Tamal Krishna later described, it was a gentleman's agreement, but there weren't any gentlemen anymore, so nobody trusted anyone else. The whole plan threatened, the atmosphere in the office was tense. No one was ready to trust anyone else with the money. Then Prabhupada meekly, almost sheepishly offered, I can hold it. And everyone immediately concurred because they knew they could trust him. The senior Mr. Mehta stayed with Prabhupada in the solicitor's chamber, and the others went to the court to withdraw the claim. Then, when Mr. Mehta's son and the others returned, he got his money. Prabhupada later summarized the settlement. Quote, Chaganlal advanced 51,000, and when there was a question of settlement, he came. He wanted that if you give me 3 lakhs, then I'll compromise. So that Mr. Ganatra Mayor, I introduced him, just make that settlement. Then Chaganlal came down, 2 lakhs, 25,000. Then I asked Mrs. Nair, now you pay this. Where I have got, if he takes all money, then what shall I get? Then I had to settle with her how much she would pay. She came from 1 lakh to 1,40,000. So what is the balance? 85. So I said, yes, I'll pay it. Settle up. The balance I'll pay, 85,000. That Chaganlal, I paid him extra 85,000. That is also black. No more white. The black money was paid in this way, and that the money was counted, and it was put in a handbag, and it was locked by him. The key was with him, and the bag was with me. As soon as court accepted the agreement, then I handed over. Take this back. Okay, that's it for tonight. How complicated.